Ciao a tutti, it's Auriam, and today we're going to be talking about every single staple monster in that format, and by staple I mean monsters that are running more than 2 decks that are at least rogue. And I'm gonna tell you in which decks they are run, so you can just know what to get if you want to get into the format. And yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff to go over. That's quite a stack. Well, we got, Maxi, we've already talked about this at length before. We've also got the artifacts and the trap trickses. We've already done videos on them where I talked about them in length, a lot of it, so check those out if you haven't. Yeah, we don't need to talk about them anymore. I've already said enough. I've already said more about those cards than anyone on Earth. But not Maxi, because God, there's still a lot to talk about Maxi. But yeah. But I also mentioned, the cards that you will run in other artifact trap tricks builds, but not at detail. So you have the hands. Which are still strong in the format, not as strong as they used to be. They're not considered ban-worthy by anyone besides noobs, and which I guess was what people were at the time. I guess, I don't know. Well, they are still running stuff like Gilgias, sometimes Madolce, Spirits can run them. Pretty much, Hieratics can run them. A bunch of decks can run them in the side deck. Stuff like Gilgias can side them. Hieratics have inside them. They still definitely have an issue in the format because they are great versus artifacts. Because, if you pop them, a big fucking deal. And they are great versus Ophion and pretty much any floodgate that isn't macro, defissure, and soul drain. So yeah, if you really fear Ophion or Real Decree, Skill Drain, you might want to consider the hands, at least in the side deck. Personally, I side this in Girgyakuri because they are very strong versus Cat, which is the best deck. So it's generally considered the best deck. So the hands are still solid. They get countered pretty heavily by stuff like the Bank and Schoolmeister, though. So do keep that in mind. And Girgyas don't really care about them because all of their shit floats and they can't really do anything versus set armor. So, but they are great in Girgyas because, you set them, you never know if it's an armor or if it's a fire hand, and the difference can be game changing. Same goes for like Worms. I've never seen Psychics run the hands, but like you could fool someone with that between Firehand and Serum Psyche, which I think I've gone long enough about the hands though. Moving on, we have Cardcar D. What supplanted the hands as the premier things to run alongside artifacts and trap trickses. It's quite a slow card, but Artifact Trap Tricks doesn't really mind that too much. But yeah, giving up the battle phase and your special summons does hurt quite a bit, so not a lot of decks can run it. Besides Artifact Trap Tricks, decks that can run it is like Saber Dragon Artifact. It's an option there. It's an option in Hunters too. It's an option in Constellars if you want to go very control based, I guess. Yeah, it's like it's not exactly a staple because like there's not too many decks that run it, but it is so relevant in the format that I kind of have to talk about it. Then we have the Firefist monsters. They're not as splashable as they used to be because like the meta isn't really suited for them anymore, but they are still great for decks that run tanky. So like Constellars often run one bear. You don't have to, but I like it, and I'm the only guy that topped with Constellars since 2022, so I run it, so you should too. I'm biased. Besides that, Kokimeru obviously wants to run these. There's a build that doesn't, but that's not very good in my opinion. Gladiator beasts run tanky, so they often run bear. Windups don't really count because they're not very good, but yeah, they're cool. So yeah, bear, gorilla, wolfpack, the ratios depends on what you play them in. You might want to play 3 bear, you might want to play 0 gorilla. You might even want to play Tensu or Gyokko, depends, but yeah. Probably should have added Tensu and Gyokko here, honestly. Then we have the mill stuff. There's a lot of milling in this format, at least of options if you want to mill. The two most common ones, at least the two best single cards are Curry Bandit and Card Trooper. Curry Bandit, obviously, very, very strong turn 1, one of the strongest turn 1 normal summons for slower base decks, for slower starts at least. You know, excavates 5, so triggers Sylvans, adds you one of those cards that you milled if it's a spell or trap. So, yeah, very solid. The problem is that, like Cardcar D, it's very, very weak to any sort of back row. Which Card Trooper is not. Well, it's weak to, like, I guess, Solemn and Moral Attack on Summon. But still, even if it gets destroyed, you get to draw a card. And if it gets Breakthrough Skill, it doesn't care because it mills as cost. The problem is, like, it mills 3, and the main decks that run it is, like, Mythic Rulers. And they run a lot of spells, so they usually just mill spells. Besides that, it's an option in AT decks. I didn't talk about it in AT video because like nobody actually runs them, and Curry Bandit is the historic one, but it is an option that you can run. Yeah. And we have the Lightsworns, of course, your 3 Raidens. Then we have Lumina, Wolf, Lila. Kind of depends on what deck you're playing this in. Like Artifact Traprix prefers Lila because it's slower, chiller. But Chaos Swarm prefers Lumina and Wolf. Lumina because, you know, it's a good card. It's Lumina, it was limited at one point. Wolf, you can set it off Lava Wall Chain, so it's very good for that. Yeah, of course, we have to talk about Charge and your Triple Solar Recharge. Recharge is one of the most high roller cards in the format. Yeah, if you can resolve it, you usually win unless you draw into Wolf. Besides that, you know, there's a lot of other Lightsworn cards, but they are only run in Lightsworn Rulers, so not really in the scope of this video. That is also the last spell we'll be showing in this video, because it's part of an engine. Could consider Rota because we are going to be talking about, you know, Armageddon and Greffer, the big dark millers, very, very strong cards in the format. Running Infernities, Chaosworn. Those are the two main decks, really. You can play even 3 copies of. You can play 1 and 3. Not really 3 and 1 with the Bolden, but you could. But yeah, most decks just run 2 and 2, or maybe 1 and 2, depends. Yeah, very strong. And we also have Summoner Monk, which is mostly just running Infernities, but you can run it in stuff like Crystal Beasts, I guess. Yeah. It's staple enough that I count it. It's generic enough, I mean. It's semi-limited. Then we have the only splashable tribute monster in the format, in my opinion, Majesty's Fiend. Completing Cat, Ghost Trick Artifact lists, pretty much most Artifact Tricks lists could play Majesties. Just the main issue with Majesties is that you really want to play Wiretap if you main deck Majesty's Fiend, and Artifact Tricks wouldn't otherwise, so that's kind of annoying. Because if you can protect it from traps, it wins you the game versus pretty much any deck, besides spellbooks. but yeah, kind of have to make it live. I guess can be not amazing versus it can be get beat by Soul Charge if you cannot address the monsters that get summoned by Soul Charge. And I guess Sylvans can beat it with Miracle Fertilizer too, I guess, but still a very hard card to get rid of with monsters. And for like Sylvans, you have Vanity's Fiend if you want to. But yeah, pretty much just tribute stun, and decks that already tribute summon played that, so like yeah, it's not nearly as splashable. For then we have generic boss monsters, well, semi-generic. Dark Armed, BLS, and Chaos Sorcerer, which is up to in the format. You play this in Chaos decks, in Spirits too, I guess, if you want to. Depends on the build a bit. Wouldn't play Chaos Sorcerer in Spirits really, but yeah, there's a couple of Chaos decks in the format that can run it. Ghost Trick Artifacts too, yeah, those can run these cards. Dark definitely a staple in Ghost Tricks. And then we have our extenders. So we have Malefic Stardust Dragon, which is your level 8 extender. It's also really expensive. I need a third one. Yeah. Strong card. Needs a field spell, which most level 8 decks can get. So besides, well, obviously you have Malefics, but besides that, Sylvans have Mount Sylvania. Darkholds have Gates. So most decks that would run it. No, there's a bunch of decks that can run it. Then we have Dynetherium, which is the main level 4 extender. It's the best, but it's not the most ran in the most decks. But it is run in the best decks that runs level 4 extenders. Infinities, you always want to play at least one, usually 2 copies of Dynetherium in Infernities. You also would definitely want to play this in like Heraldic Beasts and Crystal Beasts, because it's a wind, so it's great for that. Then for other level 4 extenders, we have Kage, which is a staple in Spirits, Heraldic Beasts, Gadgets. You know, those kind of generic rank 4 mid-range decks that besides like Handers. Because you can search it off King of the Feral Imps, which is great. Gives you follow-up. Speaking of King of the Feral Imps, there's also Masked Chameleon, which is only really run in Battle in Boxers, so I'm not bringing it up here in card form, but it's technically a generic card. Then we have Photon Thrasher, whose main niche is that he's a warrior, so that's nice. There's also this guy who's also a warrior, not as good as Thrasher, but has his perks. Then we have Tinglefish, which is sometimes run in, Infernities. Besides that, it's really strong in gadgets. Yeah. That's kind of it for our level 4 extenders. Besides that, there's also TG Werewolf as our last extender. It's kind of generic. You run it in Malolches sometimes. You can run it in like rank 3 spam Koakimeru decks, which aren't very good, but they are a thing. What else? Well, besides, obviously, you run this in TG, Artifact Raptors, and TG. And you can run this in windups because you run tanky, and a level 3 extender is nice to have in the deck. So, yeah. And finally, going into the hand traps. This is probably the 4th most commonly run card in the format, but it's mainly just a side card. Some people play it in the main deck, and I feel like the stonks for it going in the main deck are going to go up, because it's very much live versus pretty much any deck besides sometimes spellbooks. And even besides that, even worst case scenario, you get like Gilgias. You banish Gilgiano, it's kind of annoying. So it's like, it's not the worst thing in the world versus Gilgia, so it's fine to main deck in my opinion. But it's not always super high impact depending on what your deck needs. But you know, it's an instant siding versus Artifact Traptrix decks, versus Mermels if you play by North American rulings, because depending on the ruling region. In North America, if they send an Atlantean by cost, you can chain Diddy Crow and banish it, and they cannot use the effect. By European rules, you can use the effect still. It's also an instant siding versus Dragon Rulers. It's good versus Sylvans. It's also you kind of have to play at least 6 cards to have foregoing second versus Infernities. So Diddy Crow is not included for that. And it's also amazing to main deck in Ghost Trick Spirits, because it makes your spells more live. And it's also great to main deck in Madoches, because it's great to open with Hootcake. Then we have the more specific, but sometimes more the more powerful Lay of Justice Cycle Reader. This is mainly for Cat. You know, it's just better Diddy Crow versus Cat, unless you want to stop them from getting Traptrix up. But you usually are crowing the artifacts anyways. It's searchable by Gigantex, so that's good. And it's also good versus Lightsworn Ruler. It's good. Crow is good versus Lightsworn Ruler, but it's not amazing. Because like, even if you stop the ruler, they still get the Eclipse Wyvern off. And one name isn't always going to be enough to save you, but 2 usually is. It's gonna stall enough to be strong in the matchup, in my humble opinion. Either way, you generally aren't really too worried about the Lightsworn Ruler matchup. And we also have Schoolmeister, which mainly has an issue because of some dumb fuck stupid rulings that no one has any idea why they work like that. But in hard format, if your effect negates effects and not activations, or the other way around, I don't know, one of the two, you can use the effect during damage step. So this works for also like Photon Bouncer. So yeah, for some reason you can just use this versus Abyssland and the hands. So if you are looking for another counter to Mermels, Schoolmeister is great. And if you really hate the hands, it's great for that too. And also, like, maybe you want more bodies. For example, like I can think of a Fire Fist list that only runs 5 monsters, and the rest is just traps and hand traps and spells. And Schoolmeister being a body is very nice, because like, it's a 1700 level 4, can be good to normal summon, can be great with Soul Charge, which is the main niche. So yeah, definitely has a niche in the format. Then, speaking of cards that have an issue in the format, we have Flying Sea. It's not as commonly side decked as it used to be, but still a solid card versus like Infernity. Can be solid versus Girgias if you're desperate. And finally we have Honest. Great versus great in Lightsworn decks. Lightsworn Rulers mainly. Can be running Hunters, can be running Constellars. I would never do that though. If you've seen my deck profile, I ran it. I played this deck in a tournament. Honest was the only card I hated in the tournament. And yeah, couple of cards that I didn't include. Effect Valor, card Success, don't run it. Thunder King Ryo, card Success, don't run it. It's so bad versus artifacts. you know, it's just bad. Searching is not the most important thing. It's like decent versus Gyrias, but it can't even hit over armor, so it's not amazing. Especially since they can like then flip. If they have Arsenal in hand, they can just normal summon it and crash or beat over your Thunder King. Then finally we also have Grand Mole, which is just too slow for the format. So unless you're playing Rockstun, I wouldn't bother with it. And yeah, those are like just generic cards that just aren't good. I wouldn't consider running. Oh, also forgot to talk about stuff like Malicious, Plague Spreader, Zephyros, Light Pulsar, and Collapse Serpent. You know, these cards are running in Chaos Swarm mostly, and it's pretty much just that. Like, yes, they are technically generic, but no deck, not a lot of decks run them. So, like, I cannot think of any deck that's in tier 1. That's Rogue or above that runs those. And there's also Mathematician, which becomes a staple in Duelist Alliance, but in that format, the only deck that runs it is Inzectors, because it can only dump level 4 or lower. So, you know, you cannot dump rulers, you cannot dump artifacts, stuff that you'd want to dump. So, just because of the decks that are in the format, it's just not run in anything besides Inzectors. But yeah, that was it from me. I always forget to shill at the beginning. Subscribe, join the Discord, leave a comment, leave a like, all that good shit. Subscribe, ring a bell, and goodbye.